It was the type of evening Julia and Michael had come to know with an aching familiarity. It was silent, oppressive, and filled with an unseen burden. Outside their modest suburban Oregon home, the wind murmured gently through the trees. Inside, however, the quiet was nearly suffocating. The faint luminescence from a nursery nightlight cast gentle silhouettes across the space where their 6-month-old daughter, Emma, slept soundly in her crib. Her little chest rose and fell rhythmically with each breath, yet her legs, perpetually still, conveyed a much different reality. For almost 3 months, Emma had been paralyzed. It had started with faint indications that Julia could not decipher. Initially, she reasoned that Emma was simply having a sluggish day, but those days stretched into weeks. Medical tests evolved into appointments, and appointments culminated in a diagnosis. In time, a crushing truth descended upon their lives like a thick shroud. Their once vibrant baby girl was now confined to a body that would not obey her. Despite countless consultations, every medical scan, and each whispered prayer, the doctors provided no explanations, no remedy, and no timeline, only uncertainty. That evening, as Emma slept, the most distinct sound in the room was from Rex, their 3-month-old German Shepherd puppy. He was curled up at the base of Emma's crib, his large ears twitching at every creak and moan of the old house. He was typically a whirlwind of energy, inquisitive, clumsy, and always darting from one room to the next. But on this night, like many before it, Rex was motionless and attentive. His gaze remained fixed on Emma, steady and resolute, as if he possessed knowledge that Julia and Michael did not. In the living room, Julia was huddled under a worn quilt that had once been used to swaddle Emma before her condition was identified. Her eyes were glazed over, absorbed in her thoughts. Next to her, Michael stared blankly at the floor, his hands tightly clenched and his mind far away. "I just don't know how much more of this I can endure," Julia whispered, her voice strained by the pressure of her fatigue. "I pray every single night for something, anything, to change," Michael replied, reaching over to take her hand. "We need to hold on to hope," he said, though the words lacked conviction even to himself. In Emma's nursery, Rex's ears suddenly pricked up. Something was happening, and the events that followed would alter their lives for good. But before we arrive at that moment, let us return to the beginning. Emma had come into the world the very image of perfect health. From the instant Julia first held her, she experienced a feeling of completeness she hadn't known was achievable. Her daughter's brilliant blue eyes were filled with wonder, and her small fingers would clutch Julia's thumb as if to never let go. Michael would return from his long shifts at the construction site simply to see Emma kicking her feet with happiness on the living room floor. She was their own personal miracle, their guiding light. Yet, everything shifted shortly after her 3-month checkup. It began with subtle details, the kind only a mother would likely detect. Julia observed that Emma wasn't kicking her legs as vigorously during diaper changes. At first, she attributed it to a growth spurt or perhaps tiredness. Even babies have their off days, she reassured herself. But the slow days persisted. They soon became a constant stillness. Then the doctor appointments started, the waiting rooms, the scans, and more scans. Julia recalled squeezing Michael's hand as they sat before a neurologist, bracing for answers they were afraid to receive. The words landed like a clap of thunder. It was a rare neuromuscular condition, probably permanent, with no known origin and no clear treatment path. In that instant, Julia's world constricted. She was unable to process anything else the doctor was saying. Her entire focus was on Emma, lying quietly on the examination table, her small feet motionless. The diagnosis did not only impact Emma, it reconfigured every aspect of Julia and Michael's existence. Their home, which had once been filled with laughter, baby coos, and late-night lullabies, had become eerily quiet, the type of silence that felt burdensome and stifling. Each room held echoes of what had been. Tiny, unworn socks sat in drawers. Toys that had been untouched for weeks lay dormant, and a nursery chair now rocked without an occupant. Julia did her best to hold everything together. As a first-grade teacher, she had always been the source of calm in a crisis, the person others relied on. But at home, her fortitude was beginning to fray. The mornings were the most difficult. She would awaken with the hope that it had all been a terrible dream, but a glance into the crib would bring the silence rushing back. Emma would be lying there, awake but immobile. Michael, who had always been the pillar of strength, immersed himself in his work, pouring concrete and inspecting steel, anything to distract his mind from the persistent ache in his heart. Yet even at the job site, when he thought he was unobserved, his gaze would grow distant, lost in thoughts of his daughter. They both tried their utmost to remain strong for Emma, attending therapy sessions, specialist appointments, and conducting endless online research for anything that might offer a shred of hope. But the emotional cost was undeniable. In the late hours of the night, they would sit together without speaking. Occasionally, they would murmur about the aspirations they once held, of watching Emma take her first steps, of seeing her run through the backyard, of hearing her laugh in the sunshine. Now, even those dreams felt too painful to entertain, and gradually, almost imperceptibly, a distance began to form between them, not from a lack of love, but because their shared grief was too immense to bear together. In their most private moments, a single question tormented them both. How can you continue on when your heart shatters a little more each day? It was Julia's sister, Megan, who first put forth the idea of getting a dog. "You need something new in that house," she had stated one afternoon, her tone gentle yet firm. "Something to bring in fresh energy, maybe even a little bit of hope." Julia initially dismissed the notion. A dog? How could a dog possibly make a difference? Their days were already consumed by medical visits, physical therapy, and relentless uncertainty. Introducing a puppy into that environment felt like welcoming more chaos into a life already teetering on the brink. But Megan was persistent. One weekend, she arrived at their home with a 3-month-old German Shepherd puppy swaddled in a flannel blanket. His ears seemed too big for his head, and his paws were oversized, giving him an awkward yet endearing appearance. His name was Rex. Julia looked at him, hesitant. Michael remained quiet as well, simply kneeling to let the puppy sniff his hand. But it was Emma that Rex approached first. He trotted over to the crib without a moment's pause, placed his front paws on the railing, and rested his chin gently on the edge. His dark, perceptive eyes focused on the still infant inside. For a beat, nobody moved. "He likes her," Megan observed softly. From that point on, something changed. Rex was not like other puppies. He didn't race around the house or chew on furniture. Instead, he was serene, observant, and almost deliberate in his actions. Every day, he would position himself by Emma's crib, sometimes for hours on end, his head resting near the bars as if he knew precisely where he was needed most. Julia couldn't make sense of it at first. She would often look over to find Rex there, as still as a statue, simply watching Emma breathe. It was a small thing, but in a home steeped in sorrow, his quiet companionship was the first glimmer of peace they had experienced in a very long time. From the very start, Rex's bond with Emma was unique. Most puppies his age are bursting with energy, chasing their tails, gnawing on furniture, and exploring every corner. Rex, however, had a singular focus: Emma. Each morning, the moment Julia opened the nursery door, Rex would walk in and go directly to the crib. He would sit peacefully, his body curled into a patient posture, his ears attentive, and his eyes trained on the motionless baby girl. Initially, Julia and Michael attributed it to simple curiosity. Perhaps Rex was attracted to the sounds, the scent, or just the tranquility of the room. But as the days bled into weeks, it was evident that this was no common attachment. Rex didn't just sit in proximity to Emma, he remained with her. He would rest his head softly against the crib's bars, occasionally nudging her tiny hand with his nose or letting out a low, gentle sigh if she moved. It seemed as if he were trying to console her in the only way he could, by just being present. What impressed Julia the most was how Rex appeared to perceive the unspoken feelings within the house. On particularly difficult days, when her tears flowed freely and words felt too heavy, Rex would quietly lean his body against her leg, his eyes placid and knowing. There was no barking, no jumping, just his presence, just peace. Michael started to see it too. He's not just observing her, he remarked one evening while standing in the nursery doorway. He's protecting her. That simple statement lingered with Julia. Rex wasn't just providing comfort. He was offering loyalty, a silent vow. He couldn't move mountains, mend nerves, or reverse a diagnosis. But he was capable of love. And in that room, at that time, Love was more potent than anything else. It was a Thursday evening, as quiet as so many that had preceded it. The house was still. The wind outside murmured softly against the windows, and the low hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the silence. Julia was on the sofa, her legs curled under her, the baby monitor on her lap. Michael sat beside her, aimlessly thumbing through a binder of therapy notes. Their routine had become methodical. Emma's medication at 6, therapy stretches at 7, silent prayers at 9. But on this night, something was different. Rex had been pacing since they finished dinner, not anxiously, but with a focused alertness. He would go to the nursery door, sit for a moment, and then return to the living room, his tail low and his ears alert. Julia was the first to notice. "He's acting unusually," she said, watching him with curiosity. "Do you suppose something is wrong?" Michael shrugged, but his gaze followed the puppy. "I've never seen him behave this way." Then Rex did something unprecedented. He scratched lightly at the nursery door, let out a soft, insistent whine, and then turned to look at them with a direct, intense stare. Without speaking, Julia got up and followed him. As she entered the nursery, the room was exactly as she had left it. Emma was lying peacefully in her crib, her expression serene. Rex padded in after her and went straight to the crib, placing his paws on the edge and gently nudging the bars with his nose. And then it occurred. Julia blinked, uncertain at first, but she saw it again. Emma's tiny fingers were twitching ever so slightly. Then, once more, a slow, subtle curling of her hand. "Michael," she breathed, her voice shaking. "Come in here. Look, she's moving." For a second, he didn't move, as if fearing that any sudden action might shatter the delicate moment. But then he dropped the binder and ran. Michael hurried in, his eyes wide with astonishment. As they stood there, their hearts racing, Emma's legs shifted, just once, but it moved. And nothing would ever be the same. In the days that followed, everything was different. What had been a static, silent routine was replaced by moments of quiet wonder and tentative hope. The morning after Emma's fingers had twitched, Julia found herself gazing at her daughter, looking for any indication that it wasn't just a dream. She didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, while she was gently cleaning Emma's face with a warm washcloth, the baby's hand moved again, this time with clear purpose. Her fingers curled around Julia's thumb, not as a mere reflex, but as a genuine grasp. Tears streamed down Julia's face. It was real. From that point, the small miracles began to accumulate. One by one, Emma's movements started to return. They were subtle at first, a flicker of her toes, a soft extension of her foot. But with time, they became stronger. She started to wiggle her legs a little during diaper changes, to reach for her soft pink blanket, and to react to noises with small, jerky motions. Even her physical therapist was amazed. "I can't explain it," she said during a session, observing as Emma lifted her arm an inch from the mat. "This type of advancement typically takes months, sometimes years, but she's responding as if her body is reawakening." And throughout it all, Rex was a constant, steady presence. He sat quietly through every session, his watchful gaze never straying from Emma. Whenever she became tired or frustrated, Rex would inch closer, lay his head near her little feet, and simply remain there. That was all he had to do. Julia and Michael started to have faith again, not only in medicine and therapy, but in something more profound, something that science alone could not explain. Emma's recovery was not loud or dramatic, but it was happening. And every motion, every twitch, and every smile served as a reminder that the impossible might not be so impossible after all. With each small victory Emma claimed, something else started to mend, something that had been silently fracturing between Julia and Michael. In the initial period after the diagnosis, their conversations had grown short, practical, and shadowed by sorrow. They had transitioned from envisioning Emma's future to just getting through each day. But now, a change was taking place. There were more smiles, more direct eye contact, and even laughter, soft and tentative at first, as if they were relearning the feeling. One evening, as Julia watched Emma reach for her favorite stuffed bunny, Michael leaned in the doorway, his arms folded and a quiet smile on his face. "She's coming back to us," he said gently. Julia turned, her eyes moist with tears. "No, we're coming back to her." Their home, once heavy with silence and strain, had started to fill with life again. Julia found herself humming as she folded baby clothes. Michael would pause a work call just to look into the nursery. Emma's babbling now filled the air, mingling with the jingle of Rex's collar as he trailed her every move like a loyal shadow. Rex had evolved into more than just Emma's companion. He was the thread that was stitching the family back together. His constant presence had provided peace when nothing else could. He had been there during their darkest times, and now he remained just as faithful in the light. Julia often found herself observing Rex, amazed at how this once clumsy puppy had somehow sensed exactly where he was most needed. It wasn't only Emma's body that was healing, it was their hearts, their marriage, and their home. And through it all, they came to realize something simple yet powerful: quiet, patient, unconditional love could repair more than they had ever imagined. Months had gone by since that unforgettable night. Emma was now sitting up by herself, her legs kicking with glee whenever Rex came into the room. Her laughter, once a remote memory, now resounded through the house like music. As Julia and Michael sat on the couch one evening, watching their daughter crawl toward Rex, their hearts felt a sense of fullness they hadn't known for a very long time. The path they had traveled was painful, fraught with uncertainty, and filled with moments when surrender seemed easier than persevering. But now, in the warm glow of their living room, hope was no longer a far-off fantasy. It was tangible. "We still don't have every answer," Julia said softly, her gaze on Emma. "But we know one thing. Love brought us back." Michael nodded. "Rex gave us what we had lost, a reason to believe again." This was not a story of easy fixes or sudden cures. It was a story of presence, of patience, of a puppy's steadfast loyalty, and of a family's determination not to surrender. Rex didn't heal Emma through some magical act, but he showed them that healing starts with connection. Sometimes, it happens in the most straightforward ways. For anyone confronting what feels insurmountable, let this serve as a reminder. Miracles don't always appear with a brilliant flash of light. Sometimes they arrive on four paws, with quiet eyes and a heart full of love. Hold on. Keep believing, because sometimes the smallest love can ignite the greatest change.